Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into a truly extraordinary story, one that honestly challenges a lot of what we think we know about wealth, influence, and making a real impact on the world.
It really does.
I mean, picture this. Melinda French Gates, name everyone knows, right? Synonymous with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, this powerhouse, over $60 billion in assets. And she just walked away.
Yeah, quite a move.
But here's the kicker, the part that makes this way more than just news. She didn't just leave. She took $12.5 billion with her.
A staggering amount.
Now, your mind immediately goes there, doesn't it? What would you do with that kind of money? I mean, even a fraction. Build an empire. Kickback.
Right. The possibilities seem endless for personal gain.
But for Melinda French Gates, that $12.5 billion, it's not for comfort, it's not for retirement. It is like 100% for action. It's the fuel for what she calls her boldest mission yet, to fundamentally, systemically shift global power for women, half of humanity.
Wow, that's a huge goal.
So this deep dive, it's not really about the headlines, or just her being Bill Gates' former wife. We're looking at Melinda French Gates as the global force she really is. An advocate, yeah, but also a sharp strategist. A quiet powerhouse, the sources say.
Definitely quiet, but incredibly influential.
And her genius seems to lie in reshaping how the world treats women, this huge population that's so often overlooked, marginalized. Her move in 2024, leaving this massive foundation, it wasn't stepping back.
No, quite the opposite.
People close to it say it was like a rebirth, a deliberate move, channeling all these resources into a very focused personal mission to fund, accelerate, empower the systems that lift women, economically, politically, socially, all of it. Globally.
Yeah, systems being the key word there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So today we're going to break down her unique mindset, the financial strategy behind this massive mission, and her long game approach. Because the real story here, it's how she uses power not to hold on to it, but to rewrite who gets it. Okay, let's unpack this.
It's a fascinating pivot, isn't it? When you think about the scale of the Gates Foundation, I mean, it's enormous. To consciously step away from that kind of structure.
Right, and take that much capital.
Yeah, and channel it into something so specific, so personal. It really speaks volumes about her clarity, her strategic thinking.
It's not just conviction, it's strategy.
Precisely. It wasn't a retreat from philanthropy like some people maybe thought at first. It's a deep rechanneling, putting energy and resources behind a very specific belief of how change really happens, especially for women and families.
And that belief system, it starts with how she thinks about money itself.
Yeah.
It's striking, actually. When she talks about wealth, it's not like your typical billionaire talk, is it?
Not at all. You don't hear about accumulation for its own sake or preserving assets or, the status symbols.
Right. She approaches it more like an engineer solving a complex social problem.
That's a great way to put it. For her, wealth isn't the badge of success. It's not about status. It's explicitly a lever, a powerful one.
Less treasure chest, more toolkit.
Exactly. In a world where wealth often gets hoarded, worshipped, sometimes even, let's be honest, weaponized, she chooses to wield it differently. With purpose. Her focus isn't personal comfort, it's boosting collector capacity.
So the question isn't, how do I keep this?
No. The question is, how do I convert this fortune into lasting systemic change? Especially for people who just never got a fair shot. That question, that guiding principle, it seems to have shaped every single dollar she's directed philanthropically.
And that mindset, it leads right into what the sources call her investment mindset in philanthropy, which sounds, well, different from just charity.
Oh, it's miles beyond conventional charity. We think of charity as aid, donations, right? Helping people now, which is vital, of course.
Absolutely.
But Melinda operates with a more strategic calculus. Every dollar spent isn't just a handout, it's a vote for a specific future she wants to see.
A vote. Interesting.
And every grant is a catalyst, something intended to spark broader, more enduring change, something self-sustaining.
Right, you mentioned sustainability.
It's non-negotiable for her. Any initiative she backs must have the power to outlive the funding that started it. It's not about creating dependency. It's about building something that can stand on its own 2 feet.
That makes sense. You don't want programs collapsing the moment the money runs out.
Precisely. And this is where her push for impact investing really comes into play. It's about strategically putting money into ventures, into ideas that are designed to generate both social progress and sustainable growth.
So not either. Both.
Intrinsically both. She looks for innovations with that dual return. A real social benefit, yes, but also a path to financial self-sufficiency or scalability. She actually said something powerful about this.
Yeah.
Yeah, she said, philanthropy is not about giving money away. It's about giving people a better life and making that life last beyond you. That really captures it, I think.
Wow. That's engineering opportunity, isn't it?
Exactly, building ecosystems of opportunity.
And that idea, ecosystem, so not just projects, seems absolutely central to her whole strategy.
It is, instead of isolated efforts that maybe just treat a symptom.
Like a Band-Aid.
Yeah. Right. She funds integrated programs, things that don't just help women survive a crisis, but actively help them rise into leadership, into ownership, into real power.
Can you give some examples? What does that look like?
Sure. So backing organizations, giving girls access to STEM education, and not just, a coding camp. We're talking pipelines from early learning right through to university and tech careers.
Building the whole pathway.
Exactly. Or women's access to capital. She knows traditional banks often shut women out, right? So she invests in microfinance, in women-led venture funds, things that specifically target that gap.
Right.
And comprehensive maternal health care, everything from prenatal to safe childbirth. Because a mother's health is just foundational for a family, for a community.
Makes sense. But what happens when the system itself pushes back?
That's where her willingness to challenge the status quo comes in. If capitalism ignores a problem because it's not profitable.
Which happens a lot.
She doesn't just shrug, she funds around it. Supports social enterprises, nonprofits that fill the gap. If policy is the barrier, she backs lobbying, uses her networks, engages policymakers to change the rules.
So she's willing to get political, in a sense.
Strategic, I'd say. And maybe the boldest part. If there's no existing model that fits the problem she's tackling, she just creates a new one, acts as an incubator herself.
Wow. Building from scratch if needed.
It's that problem-solving approach. You can really see the engineering background influencing things, like you said earlier, viewing society as this complex system you need to optimize.
Yeah, that mindset money as a tool. Systems thinking it really explains why she'd take $12.5 billion and pour it into rewriting these systems that hold women back instead of, retiring to an island.
Right. It's not about the money itself. It's about what the money can do, what it can build. And for her, power is only really valuable if you use it to empower others, to give it away effectively.
It's that engineering rigor applied to philanthropy, not just patching leaks, but redesigning the whole system.
Absolutely. Building lasting infrastructure for human potential. That's the goal.
Okay, so that strategic architecture, that focus on systems, let's talk about the actual deployment of that $12.5 billion. Because leaving the Gates Foundation in 2024, that was huge.
Monumental. Exiting the world's biggest philanthropic engine, over $60 billion in assets. That's not a small decision.
No kidding. And it wasn't like she was forced out or anything. It was her choice.
Yeah.
And getting that $12.5 billion, it was part of the divorce agreement, right? A personal allocation.
Exactly. It signaled this wasn't a loss of influence for her. It was a transfer of capital, of focus, directly into her hands.
And what she did next proved she wasn't scaling back her ambition at all.
Not one bit. If anything, she unleashed it with this incredibly specific personal focus. The big question then was, okay, you have $12.5 billion and this massive mission-shifting global power for women. What's the plan?
Right. You don't just start writing checks randomly.
Definitely not. And she didn't. She didn't scatter it into thousands of tiny donations. Helpful, maybe, but not systemic.
Or just throw it at the big flashy causes either.
No. Instead, she built a system, a machine for change, really. And the core of that machine is Pivotal Ventures.
Which she actually started back in 2015, right?
Yeah.
But it really ramped up after she left the foundation.
It became Supercharge, the engine for this new mission. And Pivotal is fascinating because it's not your typical charity.
What is it then?
It's this really interesting hybrid. It's part think tank doing deep research on what actually works for women's empowerment. It's part venture capital firm investing directly in innovations in women-led companies. And it's part policy accelerator pushing for those big systemic legal changes.
Wow, so it covers a lot of ground.
It does.
Yeah.
And the explicit goal is to fund, yes, but also to scale and connect solutions that empower women and families, especially where markets and governments have, frankly, failed them.
So how does Pivotal actually do that day to day? It's not just about the money, you're saying.
Right. It's not just writing checks. Pivotal actively builds capacity within the organizations it supports.
Okay, what does build capacity mean in this context?
It means targeted investments in critical areas. Like backing early-stage companies founded by women, the ones that get less than 2% of VC funding.
That statistic is shocking every time I hear it.
It is. Or investing in caregiving infrastructure, innovative childcare, elder care solutions,
Oh.
recognizing that care work, mostly done by women, underpins the whole economy, but is totally undervalued.
Yeah, the invisible engine.
Exactly. They fund access to reproductive health. They invest in getting more women into politics from local level up. They're even looking at gender-inclusive AI.
AI. Why AI?
Because algorithms can reflect and amplify existing biases, right? If the code is biased against women, the future built on that code will be too. She's trying to get ahead of that.
That's incredibly forward-thinking. And you mentioned non-financial support, too.
Yes, and this is crucial. Pivotal provides things many nonprofits desperately need but can't afford. Operational guidance, political strategy help, tech infrastructure, data analysis tools. It's a whole support system.
It really drives home her belief that money without strategy is noise, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Her mission is like a symphony. Each part carefully chosen, playing together for a bigger impact. It's building the engine, not just filling the tank.
This is where it gets really interesting for me. It's not just charity. It's building this machine for change. You mentioned the VC funding gap example.
Right, the under 2% going to women founders. Pivotal saw that data.
And didn't just write a report about
No way. They jumped in, launched funds specifically for women founders, backed emerging VCs who focused on women-led businesses, started seeding a whole new generation of women innovators. They directly intervened to fix the broken system.
creating new pathways for capital. That's powerful.
And what's also really effective is her pragmatism, her willingness to partner with almost anyone who can help get the job done.
Like who?
Private companies, bipartisan policymakers, yes, working across the aisle, faith groups, local activists on the ground.
So it's not about sticking to one ideological camp.
Not at all. It's
Right.
purely results-driven. Does this partnership help achieve the goal? Then let's talk. It's about impact, not alignment.
And underneath all this action, there's this intense focus on sustainability and measurement.
Obsessive is probably the right word. She understands deeply that real power comes from systems that keep working long after the initial investment is gone.
Right, the whole outlive the funding idea again.
Exactly. So everything Pivotal does is tracked rigorously. Outcomes, impact per dollar, potential reach, structural shifts achieved, it's all measured.
Yeah.
Giving, for her, isn't passive. It is absolutely engineered.
That engineering mindset again, that strategic architecture, that's really what makes her approach feel so different, so revolutionary, even if it's quiet.
It's that belief that philanthropy isn't a temporary fix, but a fundamental redesign, looking for leverage points, feedback loops, building systems that can sustain themselves and keep growing.
You know, building those kinds of systems, especially on this scale, usually involves a certain kind of leadership. But her style seems different, unconventional,
Very unconventional, especially today.
right? She doesn't chase the cameras. You don't see headlines about her lifestyle. Yet she's moving billions, influencing global policy, right at the center of incredibly complex strategies. How does that work without the spotlight?
It's what the sources call leadership in silence. And it seems rooted in this obsession with data and long-term outcomes, probably from her tech background, right?
Makes sense.
She apparently reads constantly dozens of research papers a week, just soaking it all in. And she surrounds herself with diverse experts.
Not just people who agree with her.
Exactly. Economists, epidemiologists, gender scholars, engineers, people who can challenge her, correct her, sharpen her thinking. Everything is built on evidence. No gut guesses, no hype.
And if something isn't working,
She pivots quickly, unsentimentally. If the data shows it's not moving the needle on gender equity, they change course.
that sounds intense. And it extends to how she runs Pivotal Ventures, too.
Oh, absolutely. It's run much more like a startup than a traditional foundation.
Meaning,
Measurable KPIs for everything. And she asks the hard questions, the really tough ones. Like, what's the unit cost per woman helped here? What's the 5-year sustainability plan? How does this keep going without us? Where is this failing, and what are we doing about it now?
wow. That forces accountability.
Totally. She holds these regular, intense reviews, not for show, not for PR, purely to cut what's not working and double down on what is.
That sounds
What?
maybe a bit demanding.
Perhaps, but people who work with her describe this interesting mix. Deeply empathetic, warm, genuinely interested in the people behind the numbers,
Yep.
but also totally laser-focused on execution and getting results. Her leadership isn't happening on a stage. It's happening in strategy rooms, on whiteboards, during late-night policy calls. It's quiet, analytical, strategic force.
And she brings her own life experience into it too, doesn't she? Woman in tech, exec at Microsoft, mother, Catholic, navigating reproductive rights. That's a lot of complex perspectives.
And she seems to leverage that complexity. It helps her make more inclusive, more effective decisions, understanding the different angles, the intersections of challenges women face.
It's not just abstract theory for her.
No. And maybe the most telling thing is how she spends her time. One source called it one of her most unusual habits.
Which is?
Spending significant time directly with the people her programs are meant to serve. Not for photo ops. Real engagement.
Just talking to people.
In their homes, in clinics, in classrooms. Listening, taking notes, asking them straight up, what do you actually need from us?
Getting ground truth.
Exactly. Because she believes solutions imposed from the top rarely work. It has to come from the bottom up.
That is leadership completely without ego, isn't it? No branding, no loudness. Just focus on the mission, the people.
It might just be the most effective kind of power, the kind that doesn't center itself. She's not trying to be the most famous billionaire. She's trying to be the most useful.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Yeah.
In this age of performative leadership, constant self-promotion, what can we learn from a style that values quiet effectiveness, data, systemic change over the spectacle?
It's a huge challenge to how we normally think about leadership, right? Her approach suggests maybe the real measure isn't the size of your platform, but the depth of your impact. Maybe chasing visibility sometimes gets in the way of the actual work. She acts like impact is the only thing that matters.
And that focus on impact over visibility connects right into her broader worldview, this idea that power should circulate, not just concentrate.
Yeah, she fundamentally doesn't believe in the idea of saviors.
Right. No single billionaire, politician, or CEO can fix everything.
She thinks that's arrogant, and it doesn't work anyway. Instead, she believes in well-designed systems. Systems that lift up the marginalized. Systems that keep working long after the spotlight moves on.
Which is why she actually wants to be replaced, right?
Yeah.
By the women she's helped empower.
Exactly. It's not about building a personal monument. It's about building capacity so her intervention isn't needed anymore.
So what are the core beliefs driving that? The sources mentioned 3.
Yeah. 3 core beliefs seem to shape everything. First, power should circulate, not concentrate. She has this great quote.
Go on.
Power belongs to those who build it and those who use it to empower others. So her investments aren't just handouts. They're meant to turn women-led initiatives into self-sustaining power centers themselves, funding the multipliers.
Okay. Circulating power, what's second?
Second is dignity over dependency. She refuses to create programs that make people dependent on aid long-term.
Which can be a trap in charity work.
A big one. Instead, she funds infrastructure, childcare, health services, financial access, the tools women need to rise independently on their own terms, building self-sufficiency.
Makes sense. And the third belief?
That the long game matters more than applause. This explains her patience, her focus beyond immediate headlines.
She doesn't need the quick wins.
No. She's optimizing for impact measured in decades. She says, if you want real change, you need to be willing to plant seeds you'll never see bloom. It's about foundational work that pays off later, maybe long after she's involved. Generational patience.
Wow. And those 3 beliefs, circulating power, dignity, the long game, they shape everything Pivotal does.
They're the blueprint. It's why Pivotal supports things that seem really different on the surface, like policy advocacy, which is slow, alongside tech startups, which are fast.
Or media representation in maternal health care.
Exactly. Or funding the unsexy stuff. Care economy reform, electoral gender quotas, things that aren't flashy but fundamentally change the rules.
So the goal isn't personal glory. It's designing a world where opportunity is shared, especially with those who've been denied it.
Precisely. It even goes back to her Microsoft days, apparently. She was known for building teams where success was about enabling others, not just individual wins.
That ethos just scaled up globally.
Right. She keeps asking, how do we shift the architecture of opportunity? Not just fix symptoms. True philanthropy, for her, redesigns the whole game board so more people can win.
So connecting this to the bigger picture, she's really challenging the definition of power itself, isn't she? Moving it from this fixed thing you hold on to
a dynamic circulating force, something regenerative. She's rejecting that zero-sum idea that for me to gain power, you have to lose it.
Right. She sees it more like a resource that can multiply when it's shared well.
Exactly. Creating an abundance of opportunity, not just slicing the same pie differently. It's a revolutionary way to think about influence and change.
And speaking of influence, let's dig into that, how she wields it without seeking the spotlight. That feels radical today.
It really does. She doesn't fight for the spotlight. She seems to actively avoid it sometimes. Her focus is on redefining where the spotlight should shine.
So while everyone else asks who has the power, she's asking,
Who's missing from the table and why? She gets that power today is systemic. It's not just symbolic charisma. If the systems shut women out, the systems have to change. Period.
so how does she exert influence if not through visibility?
It's quiet, layered, deeply networked. No social media storms, no big public campaigns. Instead, she builds these broad coalitions.
With those unexpected allies you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. Tech, policy, philanthropy, even pop culture figures. She knows real, lasting influence comes from building infrastructure for change, not just being visible for a moment.
The goal isn't to be the face of change.
But to foster change that sustains itself, change that keeps happening even when she's not in the room, not getting credit.
Can we see examples of that quiet influence at work?
Definitely. Through Pivotal, she funds these behind-the-scenes policy teams, the ones pushing for paid leave, equal pay, better maternal health access. It's not glamorous work.
No rallies on TV.
Right. But it fundamentally rewrites the rules for millions of women, quietly changing their lives.
And you mentioned culture, too.
Yeah, she recognizes that cultural power is political power. So she partners with Hollywood, with creators, to support better, more diverse portrayals of women. How society sees women shapes how society treats women.
And the AI investments fit here, too.
Perfectly. Whoever shapes the algorithms shapes the future. She's trying to ensure that future is inclusive from the code level up.
Okay, but maybe the most radical idea here is that influence doesn't require ownership, that you don't need to run the show.
That's huge. You don't need to be the CEO, the person in charge, if you've successfully shaped the organization's values, priorities, direction. It's the total opposite of the strongman model, right? Control, dominance.
Yeah.
She cultivates influence like a gardener, not a general. Planting seeds, nurturing growth, spreading ideas across systems, letting others make them flourish.
I love that quote from the policy advisor. Melinda doesn't dominate the room, she rewires it.
That captures it perfectly. It's power reimagined.
And maybe that's her biggest legacy.
Yeah.
Not just changing who holds power, but changing how we even think power should be held.
Moving from that fixed hierarchical model to something dynamic, distributed, equitable, laying groundwork where influence is measured by collective uplift, not individual control.
So as we wrap this up, what really stands out is her motivation. It was never about being a symbol, getting the spotlight. It was about solving a problem, building a better system.
Absolutely. The vision is clear. A world where women have the resources to rise on their own, not wait for rescue.
Money isn't the end game. It's the engine. Power is meant to be shared, scaled, passed on, never hoarded. This $12.5 billion mission, it's about shifting the whole architecture of opportunity.
The deep lesson isn't just about philanthropy. It's about designing influence with intention.
Yeah, it's a reminder that power doesn't need to be loud or flashy to be effective. It just needs to be thoughtful, strategic. It can move silently, but create permanent change.
And it reframes wealth, doesn't it? Not as the destination, but the starting point. The real question isn't how much you have, but how clearly you see the world with what you have, and how bravely you choose to shape it.
So what does this all mean for you, listening right now? If this resonated, take a second. Don't just admire Melinda Gates. Ask yourself, what do I have? What are my resources, my forms of power, and what could they become for others? To fix something I see is wrong.
Because you don't need $12.5 billion to shift power.
Not at all. You need clarity about a problem you care about, courage to act, conviction to challenge what's unfair.
Maybe it's your voice, your network, your skills, your time.
All forms of power, if you choose to spend them like she does, deliberately, strategically, unselfishly. Because power truly lives when someone dares to build for others, not just for themselves.